everyone, this is Vishal from Equity Guru, and welcome to another Chart Attack episode. We're going to look at Meta, formerly known as Facebook, but now known as Meta. Maybe I'm still the only one calling it Facebook or FB, but it is Meta. Obviously, the big news this week has all been about Threads, which has launched. You've probably all seen that. And obviously, from a technical perspective, when that news came out, I looked at the charts and it was at a very interesting point. But we'll look at that in just a second. Just overall, taking a look at the tech stocks, the Nasdaq itself, you can actually say maybe all the other U.S. markets in general. But we are still, technically in that uptrend with your higher low, higher high, higher low, higher high. People are looking at this price level here. Where is my? I want to change things up. Oh, here we go. People are looking at this level here at the 14,700 zone, 14,690, let's call it, as a potential higher low that we could be working with. But of course, for that to be confirmed, you actually need to break above this resistance level here on the Nasdaq. So just remember this, that the Nasdaq is at a resistance or a price ceiling zone. And if I just scroll back, you can see we have multiple touches here. But again, it applies with the other stock markets. We did do a video about that about a couple of weeks ago, actually. We're warning traders and investors that, hey, markets are approaching a major resistance zone. You could see either a new trend begin or just a correction in this dominant uptrend. So, if you haven't seen that video, go back and take a look at that, because those technical levels are still being applied today. And the Nasdaq is still trying to break above this zone, and some people are already talking about a potential double topping pattern here. Again, trigger that would require this break below this 14,700 zone or that higher low. But the key takeaway, major resistance on the Nasdaq, we're either going to break out above it, which would be very, very, very bullish, or we close below, or we decline, and we either just range or we eventually break down, causing a deeper retracement. And I mentioned this because obviously what these markets do will impact what other stocks or what happens with other stocks, right? Because if the market is up, then it generally means that 3 or 4 out of 5 of the stocks are up as well, and vice versa, right? So it's very important, I think, to consider where these broader stock markets are before you look at individual stocks as well. Let's take a look at Meta. Some time for load. There we go. Meta on the Nasdaq. Some people might be surprised by this chart, but this was a chart that we looked at in the past. There's my technicals taking some time to load there. But we talked about, remember the time when Netflix and Meta were just having really, really bad earnings? We had that major gap down, which we're going to talk about that gap in just a second, because it is actually relevant. This gap from January of 2022, still relevant to this day. We had this gap here as well. Again, an earnings play. We filled that gap. And then after that, there was this turnaround, and the earnings starting to get better, right? We filled that gap, and you can see here another earnings play. It gapped up on earnings. Credit to Meta, it did turn around, right? That's what, in the eyes of investors, it turned around. And you can see that from this downtrend changing to this uptrend. And we've just been making higher lows, higher highs, just slowly climbing. You can see here I have my moving average here as well. And we've been very close to it, but still above it, confirming, that we are in an uptrend. And just as we are knocking on the door of resistance on the Nasdaq, major level here on Meta, $300 zone, very nice stronghold number. But I think the most important thing is this: the fact that this area, what we're testing right now, if we get a close above that 300 zone, this whole gap, which the stock gapped down on earnings way back in January 2022. Which was the beginning, literally of Meta just having bad earnings and just this move downwards. And you all remember that even with Netflix as well, right? Same sort of play. But that gap is now being retested once again. And some people might claim that we've already filled a gap. I would say no, because look at how weak this candle is on July 5th. Not necessarily closing above the candle bodies that we have here. Oh, I sort of lost that right there. There we go. Now you can sort of see better. Not really closing above strongly above these candle bodies that we had in January 2022. And then you can see on the 6th there, we had a red candle. So that's not a close or a strong close above the gap level. And on the day we're recording, we are still seeing some indecision, a doji candle right now, or a spinning top. But you can see here that there was, we did close, or we're close to close above that zone that we've been watching here. But the sellers have stepped in, and the last 3 days, and again, we are recording while the markets are open, so the Friday candle here could change significantly by the end of the day, or by the time you're watching this video. But so far, you are seeing signs of sellers here with these large wicks right now. So very, very significant area of resistance, not only because it's that 300 zone, but as I said, it's this gap here, right? This major gap. It could be filled. So what happens if it's filled, folks? Well, if we get this close above the 295, 300 zone, and it has to be, as I said, very, very strong green candle, then it's a super, super, super bullish sign. I mean, the stock has already been in a strong uptrend, but gap fills generally, when you fill that gap, even this gap that we've seen a long time ago, it means that, a lot of that selling pressure, because there's a lot of bears and sellers and algos watching this, saying, okay, we're testing that upper limit of the gap, which tends to be a resistance zone. So now we have a psychological $300 zone. We have this gap resistance zone, and we just have technicals as well telling us that this is a resistance zone. A lot of confluences here. So if the bulls can beat the bears, if the bulls can take out the sellers here, it would be a very, very, very bullish signal, which would even see us taking going back to 340, 360 in the long term, and potentially even taking out previous all-time record highs here around that 380 zone. But once again, a lot of it will also depend here on the Nasdaq, because we are, just like Meta, we are also testing that resistance zone. So if you see this combination of a breakout on the Nasdaq and a breakout on Meta as well, it'll be very, very bullish for Meta and well, I say tech stocks in general. But where Meta is, as I said, that gap, very, very important technical zone. And it's a gap level that I think a lot of people are watching. And as I said, it is in the news, right? Meta is in the news. A lot of people are talking about Threads, micro-blogging service to compete with Twitter. New service is called Threads, and it recorded 30 million signups in its first 16 hours of availability. Instagram users can use their credentials to log into the Threads app. I'm sure a lot of you on social media, on Instagram, have seen a lot of people market and post that they are on Threads now. I know I certainly have as well. Meta hopes to capitalize on this user discontent with Twitter under Elon Musk. And he's instigated a number of controversial changes on Twitter, and Meta and Zuckerberg, I guess, are hoping to capitalize on that. Analysts on Wall Street see this as a near-term opportunity for Threads as immaterial for Meta, but that would change if CEO Mark Zuckerberg's goal of 1 billion users can be reached. So let's take a look at this. Let's keep an eye on this. It is also very interesting when you're seeing the stock big on social media, and a lot of eyes and retail traders are talking about it, and we're at a very, very important technical zone, right? So it is either make or break here for Meta, as it is with the other stock markets that are also knocking on that door of resistance. But that's it for me, folks. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe. And where do you guys think Meta stock is going? Do you think we sell off here hard, or do you think the bulls come in, break out, fill the gap, and shoot us above 300, starting a run, medium or long-term run where we'll eventually take out new all-time record highs on Meta? I really want to hear your thoughts. Again, see you guys all in the next chart track.